everyone, and welcome back to Rainbow Magic Book Club. Today I'm going to be reading India the Moonstone Fairy from the Jewel Fairies series. Disaster has struck in Fairyland. Jack Frost goblins have stolen the jewels from Queen Titania's crown. The fairies' magic powers are fading. Can Rachel and Kirsty help get them back? It's a glittering jewel and neat rainbow magic story. Help the girls to collect them all and restore the magic to Fairyland. Rainbow Magic, the Jewel Fairies. Okay, India the Moonstone Fairy. Fairyland Palace, Adventure Playground, the Tall Toy Store, Fountain, Tippington Town, Twisty Tree, Pegasus, Rachel's House, Buttercup Farm, Chestnut Tree, Scarecrow, Cherrywell Village, Jack Frost's Ice Castle. Now let's hear Jack Frost spell. By frosty magic I cast away these 7 jewels with their fiery rays, so their magic powers will not be felt, and my icy castle shall not melt. The fairies may search high and low to find the gems and take them home, but I will send my goblin guards to make the fairies' mission hard. Here's the content. A nasty nightmare, fairy news, lost, on the right track, hot pursuit, rockabye goblins. A nasty nightmare. Kirsty, help! Rachel Walker shouted. The goblins are going to get me. Panting, Rachel glanced behind her. She was running as fast as she could, but the green goblins were getting closer and closer. They were grinning nastily, showing their pointy teeth. Now one of them had grabbed Rachel by the shoulder and was shaking her hard. Rachel! Kirsty Tate was leaning over her friend's bed, shaking her awake. Wake up! You're having a nightmare! Rachel woke up and sat up in bed. What time is it? She asked. I dreamt that there were horrible goblins chasing me. I couldn't escape. It's 7:30, Kirsty replied, perching on the edge of the bed. Nope, it's not 7:30. It says 7:32. She should have said 7:30, She should have said 7:32, not 7:30. Why were the goblins after you? Rachel frowned. I can't remember, she sighed. But you know what, Kirsty? I've got a funny feeling that Jack Frost might be up to something again. Kirsty's eyes opened wide. Oh, do you really think so? She gasped. Then maybe our fairy friends will need our help. Rachel and Kirsty shared a magical secret. They'd become friends with their fairies, and whenever there was a problem in Fairyland, Kirsty and Rachel were called on to help. The fairies' greatest enemy was Jack Frost. He was always looking for ways to make trouble, helped by his mean goblin servants. Not long ago, Jack Frost had tried to ruin the celebration party for King Oberon and Queen Titania's 1000th Jubilee. But lucky, Kirsty and Rachel had come to the rescue. We'll have to keep our eyes open, Rachel agreed. If the fairies need our help, they'll let us know somehow. Kirsty nodded. Well, it's only the beginning of half-term, and I'm staying with you for a whole week, she pointed out, so we have plenty of time. Before Rachel could reply, the sweet, tinkling sound of music suddenly filled the room. Both Kirsty and Rachel jumped. What's that? Kirsty asked. Rachel looked puzzled for a moment, but then she began to laugh. It's my music box, she smiled, pointing at the dressing table. The one the party fairies gave us. After helping the party fairies to stop Jack Frost from spoiling the Jubilee celebrations, Rachel and Kirsty had each been given a beautiful musical jewellery box with a tiny fairy on top. Rachel's box sat on her dressing table, and the girls could see that the fairy was spinning round in time to the music. Yes, but how did it start up on its own? Kirsty asked with a frown. I didn't mind it, and you've only just woke up. Look, Rachel gasped. The box is glowing. Rachel scrambled out of bed, and she and Kirsty rushed over to take a closer look. Rachel was right. The box was glowing with a faint pink light, which shone from under the closed lid. Lift the lid, Rachel, Kirsty whispered. Hardly daring to breathe, Rachel reached out and slowly lifted the lid. Immediately, a glittering shower of multicolored fairy dust burst from the jewelry box, swirled around the girls, wrapping them in a cloud of sparkles and lifting them off their feet. Fairy news! After a moment or two, the sparkles began to drift away, and the girls felt their feet lightly touch the ground. Rachel and Kirsty blinked a few times and looked around. Kirsty, we're in Fairyland, Rachel gasped. In our pajamas, Kirsty added. The girls were now fairy-sized, with glittering fairy wings on their backs, and they were standing in the golden great hall of the fairy palace. King Oberon and Queen Titania and a small crowd of fairies stood in front of them. The girls noticed that they all looked worried. Queen Titania stepped forward. You are very welcome, girls, she said with a smile. I hope you don't mind us bringing you here so unexpectedly. There's Rachel and Kirsty. Some fairies. Some more fairies. Of course not, Rachel said quickly. You have been such good friends to us in the past, the Queen went on, that we were hoping we could call you again, now that we are in trouble. What's wrong? Asked Kirsty anxiously. Let me explain, the Queen replied sadly. Every year at Halloween, we have a huge celebration in Fairyland. All the fairies have to recharge their fairy magic for another year. So every fairy in Fairyland parades around the grand square, King Oberon put in. Then they all march into the palace to a very special chamber where Queen Titania's tiaras rest upon a velvet cushion. It sounds wonderful, Rachel sighed, hoping that she and Kirsty might be allowed to watch the grand procession one day. Queen Titania nodded. It is, she replied, and my tiara is very important for fairy magic. It has 7 beautiful jewels set in it. A sparkly fountain of fairy dust pours from each of the 7 jewels, and they join together to form one of the great glittering rainbows of magical fairy dust. Kirsty and Rachel were listening carefully, their eyes wide. What happens then? Kirsty asked. Each fairy must dip her wand in the rainbow fountain to recharge it, the Queen explained. Then she'll be able to perform magic for another year. The King shook his head sadly. But now Jack Frost has put a stop to all that, he sighed. 2 nights ago, he crept into the palace and stole the 7 jewels from the Queen's tiara. Oh no! Rachel and Kirsty exclaimed together. Our special celebration was to take place in a week's time, the Queen went on, looking worried. So the fairy's magic is already running low. The jewels must be returned to the tiara, King Oberon added, before the fairies run out of the jewels' magic completely. Does this mean that there will be no magic at all left in Fairyland? Asked Kirsty anxiously. Not exactly, the Queen replied. Fairy magic isn't quite as simple as that. Some magic, like the weather magic and rainbow magic, aren't controlled by the jewels. But the jewels do control some of the most important kinds of fairy magic, the King explained, like flying, wishes, and sweet dreams. Some people have already started having nightmares. Rachel nodded, thinking of her own scary dream. We have to get the jewels back, she said firmly. Where is Jack Frost now? Kirsty wanted to know. He has taken the jewels to his ice castle. The Queen shook her head. Jack Frost doesn't have the jewels anymore, she said. Come with me, and I will show you what happened. Rachel and Kirsty followed the fairies outside into the beautiful palace gardens. They stopped beside the golden pool. Its surface is clear and as smooth as glass. Look, Queen Titania said, softly waving her wand over the water. Immediately, tiny ripples began to spread across the surface of the pool. The ripples grew bigger and bigger, and slowly a picture appeared on the water's surface. Oh no, Jack Frost. It's Jack Frost, Rachel exclaimed. Tall, thin, spiky Jack Frost stood in front of the Queen Titania's golden tiara. Upon its velvet cushion, 7 magic jewels glittered as dazzling streams of magic dust poured from each one. Laughing, Jack Frost thrust his snowflake-tipped wand into the magic rainbow fountain, where it glowed like fire. He's recharging his magic, the king explained. Kirsty and Rachel watched in dismay as Jack Frost prized the sparkling gems from the golden tiara. He waved his wand and immediately the jewels were encased in solid ice. What's he doing? Rachel asked, puzzled. Me and Jack Frost. The light and the heat of the jewel's magic makes them difficult for cold, icy creatures like Jack Frost and his goblins to hold, Queen Titania explained. Look. Now Jack Frost was whizzing back to his ice castle, carried by a frosty wind, which blew him along. He carried the jewels in his arms, but Rachel and Kirsty could see that the hard shell of frost around them was already beginning to melt. Jack Frost swooped down from the grey sky and landed in the throne room of his ice castle. By this time, the frost around the jewels had almost melted away. The jewels glowed, casting shimmering rays of light like laser beams into every corner of the icy room. Goblins came running to see the gems, wearing sunglasses to protect their eyes from the glare. Stand back, you fools! Jack Frost roared, waving his wand again and casting another spell to cover the jewels with ice. But the jewels were still glowing, and the ice began to melt away almost immediately. Look, master! Yelled one of the goblins suddenly. The fairy magic is melting your castle. Jack Frost looked in a fury. Sure enough, water was beginning to trickle down the icy walls, and there was a puddle at the foot of the throne. Jack Frost's magic is not strong enough to block the power of the jewels, Queen Titania told Rachel and Kirsty. The girls watched the goblins begin to rush around, mopping up the water as fast as they could, but as quickly as they cleared one puddle away, 2 more appeared. Very well then, shouted Jack Frost, stamping his feet in rage. If I cannot keep these magic jewels, no one else will have them. I will cast a spell to get rid of them. And he raised his wand high above his head. Thank you for watching me and listening to me read India the Moonstone Fairy. Tomorrow, I will be reading more of India the Moonstone Fairy. Normally, I don't do part 2s. I'll read some of the book or the whole book, but normally I don't read like part 1 and part 2 and part 3. But tomorrow I'm going to read more of India the Moonstone Fairy. But tomorrow I'm also going to read Scarlett the Garnet Fairy. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!